What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here, PackersNews.com, live on Facebook late in the day on Monday, getting in the late afternoon. All quiet on the Packers front, but a daily tradition, jumping on here on Facebook, see what's up, see what's on the minds of Packers fans everywhere. Of course, the big news in the world of sports today is the legalization, or soon-to-be legalization, of sports betting everywhere. You can expect the floodgates to open. Not so sure we're talking about betting windows at Lambeau Field anytime soon, but you can bet every facet of sports fandom will be touched by this decision from the Supreme Court today. So that's exciting, and that's something to look forward to. Hello to everyone in the comments, jumping in. Nice to see you all on this fine Monday afternoon. I've turned into a beautiful day here in New York City. Orlando checking in. What's up, Matthew? How are you? James, I did have a good weekend. Thank you very much. Grades are due by midnight. Care to help grade final exams? Not a chance, but thank you for the offer. The hat is finally back. It is. My hair is getting long and unruly. It's a problem. Wayne, hello. Thanks for joining us. Tony, what's up, man? Thanks for the daily Packers updates. You are welcome. It's what they pay me the big bucks to do. I'm here for the people. Phil, what's up, man? Another vice I can fulfill when I go to Lambeau. Daniel, you got that right. We'll see how quickly the NFL turns around on this. Roger Goodell, recently his last offseason, was talking about his opposition to the idea of sports betting, concerns about the integrity of the game. I actually think, if anything, this strengthens the integrity of the game because everything, not everything, obviously sports betting was legal in a few places, but this idea that this is going to open some floodgate to problems with officiating or players taking dives, etc. I mean, all of those safeguards have been in place for quite some time because of illegal gambling and the worry about those elements getting a foothold in the NFL. I think this will only strengthen the idea that they can combat those type of things. Specifically, the NFL and the NBA both coming right out today and asking for federal regulation of sports betting. You can bet that is definitely going to be around the corner. And you can also bet that the NFL and the other leagues will want to figure out the easiest way to take a little bite out of that pie. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Will Brett be back? Please say no. You mean Brett Favre? No, I think you mean Brett Hundley. I believe he'll be given the opportunity to compete for the backup job. Why not? He's cheap insurance. He knows your offense. And if anything were to happen behind Aaron Rodgers, you have somebody who started games for you who can step in and run the offense. Now, is it going to be at an exceptionally high level? Probably not. But you do know you can get through a game with a guy. Sheboygan, what's up, Dan? How are you, man? Home of my birth. Place of my birth. Why would we want another wide receiver? This coming right after a question about Dez Bryant. I tend to doubt the Dez Bryant thing happens after the draft now that they've drafted 3 new wide receivers, but you never know. No Twitter mention of George Lucas's birthday. You're slipping, Nags. Yeah, well, I wish him a birthday in my heart. The maker. Where's Honey Badger? He is in Houston with the Texans. Worst returner, Davis or Jeremy Ross? Whew, man. I think Davis is actually really talented once he gets the ball in his hand and heads upfield. Ross, not so sure I'd give him that platitude. Is Clay playing out the rest of his deal? I would think so. He's entering in the last year of his deal, so probably I'd expect they let this season play out and then see where they stand at the end of the year. It's a new he doesn't know it, Hundley out. No, that's not true. It's still going to be the same concepts and the same a lot of the same terminology, not completely. Of course, they're changing some things, but it's still a West Coast offense. It's still Mike McCarthy's offense. They're not going to completely abandon everything that they've done the last decade plus. They are renaming some stuff, and they are adding new ideas, whatever that may mean. But this idea that it's going to suddenly be like Jim Harbaugh's offense or something is misplaced. Pick up Eric Reed. Mark, I don't think they see safety as a area of need. Perhaps if an injury strikes here coming up next week in the OTAs or minicamp, maybe they go that route. But I'd be very surprised if they made that call. Do you think Gutekunst will make any additional moves? Yeah, Chris, I wouldn't be surprised if he looked and brought in a veteran or two yet, depending on how people look next week when the OTAs begin. But I don't think I would doubt that he's looking at his roster right now and thinking, I've got to fill in here or there. I do think he'll wait to get the entire squad on the field for a week or so and then see what he's got. Now, I say that, and maybe he has his eye on someone, and he brings someone in right before OTAs begin. But that's just my guesswork at this point. Dez alongside Adams and Cobb plus Jimmy will be dangerous offense with Aaron in Green Bay. I tend to agree, but I also think they drafted those three wide receivers for a reason. They're going to give them every opportunity to show what they can do. Do you see Montgomery playing more wide receiver this season? I talk about this quite a bit, but I would say I think he'll be a switchblade type player. I think he'll still primarily be a running back, but you will see him used in a lot of different ways. Do you think Bulaga will play 9+ games this season? Whew, man. Who knows? Flip a coin. How are you, Jennifer? I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Do you think Green Bay winds up with 7 wide receivers or 6 plus Montgomery? I do think Montgomery gives them some flexibility there. I'd be shocked if it was 7. I mean, I know they've gone that route once before, but I can't imagine everyone making it. I tend to think there's going to be some brutal, from the outside looking in, brutal cuts come the end of camp. I'd be very surprised if they kept more than 6. Did they extend Rodgers yet? No. I would expect that sometime this summer, probably right before camp. Could Trevor Davis even make the team? Yeah, absolutely. I think, you'd be foolish to dismiss the guy without giving him a chance to come back and compete and show development and some semblance of a step forward in his game from scrimmage, because that's really where you need him to step up. I do think Jair Alexander is really going to push him in the return department, but I don't think you toss him aside. You definitely bring him back and see if he can give you one last shot, so to speak. Why the heck has Dez gone unsigned? I think it's mostly money and him being picky and wanting to wait. I tend to think right at this point he'll probably wait to see if an injury happens somewhere. Anyone still missing Jordy? Anyone else still missing Jordy? Juan, I'm sure there are plenty of people who still miss Jordy. Who do you think will be the opening day running back? Justin, I think they'll continue to really rotate there. A large part of that will depend on how much development we see from Aaron Jones in the pass blocking and pass protection department. If he is able to improve that element of his game, that part of his game, I think you'll see a lot more of him than the other guys. How good can Graham be with Rodgers throwing him the ball? Really good. Really productive. Extremely effective. And that's the thing. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's going to suddenly, become a fantasy darling, because I just don't think the Packers offense operates that way. But, that production that Rodgers had with Nelson on the field has got to go somewhere. Now, some of that obviously will go to Cobb and Adams and some of the guys out of the backfield, but I tend to think Jimmy Graham is going to see a lot of balls, and he's going to affect the offense quite a little bit. Jamal Williams is hands down first back. I think coming out of camp, most likely he'll be given the first opportunity. I think Jones is just much more explosive, has better vision. Is pretty much better in every area except for pass protection. Jamal is a bruiser. There's no doubt about it. If I was coach, you guys think you're lucky stars. I'm not. But if I was coach, I would have Jones pretty much be the slasher that I'd use like the first half, 3 quarters, getting a lead, and then bring Jamal Williams in the fourth quarter and just absolutely pound my opponent into oblivion while they have tired legs. That's how I'd use them. But like I said, nobody wants that. Guesstimate if Montravius Adams will contribute or if he is a bust. I mean, the guy was injured all camp last year and then couldn't get on the field because, he was so far behind. I don't kill the kid for that. Let's see what he does with pads on and, some reps under his belt in training camp this year. We'll see. But to talk about him being a bust this early is kind of silly. Reggie Gilbert, the next KGB, DeMario? I don't know about the next KGB, but I think he's got a little something. He definitely showed promise those 2 games he got to play last year. I know a lot of people were surprised he didn't make the initial 53 coming out of camp. And McCarthy and Gutekunst both, expressed reservations about or regrets about not being able to get him up to the 53 prior to Week 16 last year. So the opportunity is there. There's no doubt about that. I think he'll be given ample opportunity to show what he can do, getting to the quarterback, playing the outside linebacker position in Mike Pettine's defense. Starting corners, I tend to think Tramon Williams will start on one side, and then the battle will be on the other side between King, Josh Jackson, maybe Lindsey Pipkins on the other perimeter, and then I think Jair Alexander will man the slot. That's just kind of reading the tea leaves there. I think Alexander really fits the bill for what they need from that nickel corner position. I think Pettine will be able to kind of play around with his athleticism and use him both covering slot wide receivers, backs out of the backfield, sending him, to pressure the quarterback, things of that nature. He's a real kind of wild card in that regard. And I do think you're going to want somebody like Jackson or King opposite Tramon to man up on some of the bigger wide receivers you're going to find on the perimeter. Who do you like long-term, Jackson or Alexander? It's a really good question, Scott. I think both their tape is, really promising. It's really just so hard to say until we see them on an NFL field going against NFL talent. They both show immense promise. But, as far as how they're going to fare in the league, it's impossible to say until we, see them against some NFL-level competition. After this year, does Clay Matthews sign with the Bills or the Vikings? That's a good question. I tend to think the Packers will bring him back. Probably, obviously, not at the rate that he's going for this year. But if he has a strong year as he did last year in 2018, I don't see why they wouldn't bring him back. Other than maybe he wants to get out and prices himself out of town. But I tend to think he'll want to stick around. And I tend to think if he plays as well as he did last year. And I know people point at the lack of sacks, but if you watch the tape, the guy played really well. Overall, it was his strongest year in Green Bay in quite some time. And a lot of those lack of sacks, quote unquote, come down to quarterbacks being able to get rid of the ball right away. Will they bring him back at the price point that they're paying him this year? No chance. But like I said, if he has a strong year, I think they bring him back. How's that new punter? William, we'll find out. I haven't really seen him yet. A strong year for Clay in 2018. Was I asleep? In 2017, John, yes. And yes, apparently you were asleep or you didn't watch the tape. Don't box score scout, guys. It's the worst thing in the world. How's the offense changing? Nathan, we don't really know. All we know is that Mike McCarthy has talked quite a few times about breaking down the offense to its core and building it up from page one, the playbook. Now, what that means, we don't really know. Like I said earlier, my hunch is that a lot of it will stay the same. We'll still see Mike McCarthy using a lot of the things that have made his time in Green Bay successful with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. But I am interested to see if there's much change when it comes to formation diversity, personnel usage, and things of that nature. Does Cobb get the rare third contract from the Green Bay Packers? Andrew, I think a lot will depend on how productive he is now that Jordy Nelson's gone. And, obviously, I've made a lot of hay on both here and on Twitter about Cobb and the lack of appreciation for what he does. Clearly, when you look at his pay, he is overpaid from the standpoint of his production. Now, I contend that if you widen your gaze and you look at everything from his effort to his ability against corners on tape when the ball isn't coming his way, the guy can still play. He just doesn't get the opportunities that he did back in 2014 when he signed the big contract. Now, there have certainly been moments throughout the life of this contract where he has been disappointing, especially 2-3 years ago. But last year, especially, if you turn on the tape and you watch him away from the ball, Rodgers goes other places with the ball, and then Hundley just doesn't even look at him a lot of the time. But, his effort is there. His play is high level. He just wasn't getting the opportunities. Mostly because a lot of the time, Rodgers is turning things down in phase and then breaking outside the pocket and finding either Jordy Nelson or somebody else on the other side of the field, etc. But Cobb can still play. He can still play at a high level. And when you look at the market for, his services, you look at the contract that Jarvis Landry just signed, he probably could make a whole lot of money out on the open market. And I would be very surprised if the Packers were willing to pay that, given the resources they just put into the wide receiver position in the draft. That's a long way of saying I'd be very surprised if Cobb is back on a third contract. But stranger things have happened. What are the strengths and weaknesses of Davante Adams? That's a really good question. I think his biggest strength is his route running ability and his ability off the line of scrimmage. He has become an absolute technician at setting guys up to make them take false steps and to get out of that initial burst off the line. Whether somebody's playing press, bail, what have you, he knows exactly what needs to get done. The weakness, it's funny. He is prone to a lack of concentration from time to time, and it shows up. Last year, the most famous moment, the one that you could probably take Madden's telestrator and put it around it, was the inexplicable moment when Hundley hits him on a perfect deep ball, and he doesn't really try. He puts out one hand. I think it was the Detroit game, and he puts out one hand and barely kind of bats it, and really almost doesn't make an effort to catch it. And there are a couple of instances like that. Not that dramatic, but and it's funny because he wrote about it for the Players Tribune, about always needing to expect the ball. And there are still moments where you can see he is just prone to a lack of concentration every once in a while. So that to me is kind of the one thing I've noticed in his game where if you had to find a weakness, that would be the one. Now, it doesn't show up a lot. I think for the most part, it's pretty negligible. But it is the one point you can kind of see a few times throughout his tape. Now, that said, how much of that is him shutting it down, so to speak, because it's Brett Hundley? I don't know. But that's the one weakness I can find. Who benefits the most from the arrival of Muhammad Wilkerson? Andrew, I think the obvious answer there is Mike Daniels. If Mo can provide any kind of wreak any kind of havoc opposite Daniels on the line, whether it's early in the downs, whether it's on third down, etc., Daniels should see fewer double teams. Obviously, Daniels has played a lot of football these last few years, and I think a lot of that time he's been frustrated because he hasn't been able to rush the passer as much as he'd like to. Some of that has been because coaches have kept him on the sideline, and some of that is just because teams have double-teamed him. Kenny Clark is an ascending young player, and he's played very well, but he's not, for the most part, on passing downs, he's not either A, on the field, or B, commanding a double team. Mike Daniels has been, especially after week 1 when he completely torched the Seahawks. Now, obviously, you can argue about the level of competition there because the Seahawks offensive line struggled mightily all season. But Daniels, he's been kind of a guy with a bullseye on his back, and Wilkerson could take some of that heat. Definitely if he shows anything resembling the form he had early on in his career with Pettine as his defensive coordinator. If he can get any of that going, Daniels should feast. Are you Scottish or Irish? No, I'm Russian and German. Who are Rodgers' hangout buddies? I know Bakhtiari is one of them. And I think Cobb as well. As of right now, would you pick up HaHa's 5th year deal? No. But he's in his 5th year. So would I do it again? No. I would have done it in the first part. Who starts on the right side of the offensive line? I think Justin McCray is your guard. Right tackle, it's going to be whoever shows the most in camp. Because I doubt Brian Bulaga is ready for week 1. My daughter wants to know, who is your favorite player to watch besides Rodgers? In the NFL, it's Tyrann Mathieu. In Green Bay, that's a good question. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I would say, I don't really know. Probably, in camp it was Joe Carriage. He was incredible last summer. I still contend if he hadn't gotten hurt, he would have pushed Ripkowski for a roster spot. So tell your daughter Joe Carriage, and then explain to her who Joe Carriage is. Jimmy Graham is being touted as a great receiver yet poor blocker. Is that shortcoming ability, and then your comment cuts off? I'm sorry. I'm imagining is that him or his usage, maybe? To put it simply, there are probably hard drives full of video of Jimmy Graham being a poor blocker throughout his career. It's just not something he's ever excelled at. And it's not, I think the will is there. I think there were plenty of times in Seattle you saw him, efforting to block guys, but especially in Seattle because they had so many protection issues that they kept him in quite a bit. He's just not very good at it. And that's not a knock on Jimmy. I think he's, like I've stated several times, I think he's really going to open up the offense. He's going to be what Jared Cook was. And that, that's who he is. And it's just, I don't think it's a lack of desire. I think he's more than willing to. But the coaches know who he is. Offensive coordinators know who he is. At least McCarthy does, and Sean Payton did. I'm not so sure about Darren Bevel. I think Bevel was kind of given this guy and didn't really know what to do with him. But I think it's just at this point too, especially this late in his career, it's not like the switch is gonna turn on all of a sudden. But I think he will be a pretty legit big time offensive weapon for the Packers. And best guess at which rookie gets on the field the most? Ooh, Donovan. Man, off the top of my head, I'd say Jair Alexander's got that wrapped up. I think they're so kind of desperate for help in the secondary and to get some of these young guys on the field and get them experience as much as possible. And I think this, like I said earlier in the video, I think the slot is where the clearest path to playing time is. I think with guys like Tramon Williams and Kevin King and Devon House, you're going to be going up against some guys with NFL experience if you're a rookie, i.e. Josh Jackson. And I do think they will try Alexander outside. I just think in the slot is where the biggest hole is and the most opportunity will be. And I think Alexander will have kind of the inside track there. Any chance Moore starts opposite Adams week 1? Yeah, absolutely there's a chance. Do I expect that to happen? Probably not, but you never know. It really depends on what he shows in camp. If he exhibits the ability to not only learn the playbook, but then know all the adjustments at the line of scrimmage, be where he's supposed to be when Rodgers expects him to be there. That's how Allison, basically stayed on the practice squad. He was close to making it to the 53, but clearly was called up later in the year as an undrafted free agent. Big reason he got stuck around is because he showed that stuff early on. If Moore can do that, obviously he'll be given a little more leeway because he's a draft pick. But if he can do that kind of thing and be productive and make the most of those opportunities in camp, absolutely he's got a chance. What's your favorite stadium to see a road game at? You guys won't like this answer, but I'll say Jerry World because they have beer on tap in the press box after the game. Do you think there's a chance we will do a series of all or nothing? Ooh, no chance. Not while Mark Murphy and Russ Ball are in town. Lock it up. No way. Were you in favor of NFL Europe? Should it return? Mike, I loved NFL Europe. I know why it went away because NFL owners were losing money hand over fist. But yeah, I loved it. I loved watching it. I loved having a developmental league where some of these guys could go and play and get game experience. Yeah, I loved it, but I didn't have to run it, so that was okay. What are OTAs? OTAs are organized team activities, Gregory. Basically, it's a glorified name for their first real work on field with coaches and installing offense, defense, and things like that outside of the classroom. Those will start next Monday. Right now they have something called individual. There's some kind of acronym for that as well. I can never remember what it is, but right now they're doing mostly classroom work, or they have been doing classroom work. And when they get on the field on Monday, they'll be kind of making that jump start of taking what they're learning in the classroom and putting it on the field. It's actually pretty long and boring for the most part. You do see guys show every once in a while a little bit of athleticism that makes you kind of turn your head and go, "Oh, that's neat." But for the most part, they're learning the offense. They're doing their installs. They're our first and 10 runs, our second and our short yardage bootlegs, etc. Like things of that nature, where they're breaking down the playbook and they're transferring what they're learning in the classroom onto the field. Graham lining up more as a receiver this season? Oh, absolutely, Adam. No question. You'll see him split out wide quite a bit. Do you see the Pack making any moves on the offensive line yet, picking up an extra vet? I doubt it. Again, I tend to think they'll roll with what they've got. Maybe if someone comes free that unexpectedly, maybe they take a look. But for instance, today, Byron Bell, I know, was working out with the Jets. That's a guy the Packers had in last year for a look before he ended up signing in Dallas. And he's got some tackle experience. I don't think he's very good. I don't think he's much of an upgrade, but that would be the type of vet that would be available right now. But there's no word that they've called him or anyone else. So I tend to think they're gonna stick with what they got. Can Montgomery block at all? No, a little bit. He got a little better. He's not great at it. That's one area that's something they really worked with him on in the offseason last year. They had Brandon Jackson in as an intern last spring. Clearly the focus was trying to improve that part of his game. I don't think it's ever going to come naturally to him. I do think he can continue to get better at it, but it's certainly not his strong suit. Bring back Kevin Barry. Now you're talking, Scott. Well, U71 action. Dude, that's crazy. 2 Kevin Barry comments in a row. That's amazing. And that's a sign it's time for me to go. All right, everybody, I'm going to jump. Thank you so much for your comments. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to yours. I thank you so much for, making this part of your daily Packers routine. It's great that everyone shows up, talk some Packers. Make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest. Anything having to do with the Packers, we got it covered for you. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.